At the billionaire's estate, the evening was meant to unfold like a polished performance: glossy smiles, clinking champagne glasses, and heartfelt toasts in honor of the perfect son-in-law's 40th birthday. But when former Special Forces operative and financial mastermind Daniel Novak notices his wife whispering something to her ex, a man who had no business being in their home, a subtle shift cuts through the air. Behind the flawless facade lies a meticulously crafted betrayal, seconds away from erupting. His wife isn't who she pretends to be. Her father is a stock market shark, willing to rip into his own flesh for control. And ghosts from Daniel's military past begin to resurface as encrypted files emerge. Millions are traced to offshore accounts, and a threat looms that could annihilate not just his career, but his very name. When the masks fall and the treachery is exposed, only one question remains. Are you cold enough to survive the empire you built with your own hands? Greetings, my dear viewer. Please tell me which city and country you're watching this video from. Maybe you're watching me from a small town or a gigantic metropolis. Write about it. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends. It will make me very happy. Let's get started. Daniel Novak had never considered himself a man blessed by fortune, at least not until Bella stepped into his world. That morning, the boardroom of Stanton Financial Holdings buzzed with tension. 7 impeccably dressed investment bankers, faces polished with artificial charm, competed fiercely for the chance to manage Gordon Stanton's newest portfolio of tech assets. Mr. Novak, your strategy was unconventional, Gordon remarked, leaning forward, his gold cufflinks glinting beneath the stark lights overhead. Daniel met his gaze without flinching. Everyone else promised the moon, Gordon went on, while you pointed out the risks. Because anyone guaranteeing returns is either lying to you or lying to themselves, Daniel replied evenly. I believe in transparency from the beginning, Mr. Stanton. It was only then that Daniel noticed the woman seated at Gordon's right. Framed by honey-blonde hair, her striking features held a sharp intelligence paired with undeniable allure. She leaned toward her father, murmuring something that made Gordon smirk. My daughter thinks you're either a madman or a man of courage, Gordon said, amused. I'm inclined to agree with the second. You have the contract, he added. That encounter had taken place 5 years earlier. Now, Daniel found himself standing in the vast entry hall of their estate, quietly watching as Bella directed the caterers for his 40th birthday celebration. Their relationship had ignited quickly, sending shockwaves through the financial elite. No one had expected the fiercely independent daughter of Gordon Stanton to marry a self-made financial advisor, an outsider whose early years were carefully omitted from polite society's conversations. You're staring again, Bella said without looking up, somehow sensing his attention. Just thinking how lucky I am, Daniel replied, smiling. She finally turned toward him, but the smile she offered didn't quite reach her eyes. Save the sweet talk for the guests, Dom. Dad's invited some heavy hitters tonight. Her voice carried an edge, a brittleness that unsettled him. He'd been noticing subtle but troubling shifts for months, conversations that barely skimmed the surface, an emotional distance where intimacy once lived, long absences, secretive texts. His phone vibrated, a message from Tobias Reed, his old Army Ranger brother and now the head of cybersecurity at Daniel's company. We need to talk. Found something serious. Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket. Whatever Tobias had uncovered would have to wait. Tonight was about appearances, something Daniel had perfected long before he ever crossed paths with the Stanton family. Gordon had hired him for his financial prowess. What Gordon hadn't realized was the truth behind Daniel's spotless record. An orphan turned soldier who joined the military at 18, became a special operations operative by 20, and spent nearly a decade conducting missions so classified they no longer existed on paper. Daniel's clean history wasn't luck, it was intentional. As guests began to filter in, Daniel assumed his familiar mask, the charming, flawless son-in-law. Yet he couldn't miss the anxious energy radiating from Bella, nor the way her eyes repeatedly darted toward the front door. "Waiting on someone?" he asked lightly after catching her checking the entrance yet again. "Just wondering where Dad is," she replied too fast. "He's usually on time." When Gordon eventually arrived, he wasn't alone. Walking behind him was a tall man with copper-toned hair and a confident swagger that Daniel recognized instantly. Philip Walker, Bella's former college boyfriend and a one-time Stanton Holdings executive who had jumped ship to a competitor 3 years prior. "Daniel," Gordon boomed warmly, clapping him on the back. "Happy birthday, son. You remember Philip, don't you?" "Of course," Daniel said smoothly, offering his hand. Philip gripped it just a bit too tightly. "It's been a long time," he said, his smile never touching his eyes. "Congratulations on everything you've accomplished, Daniel." Philip's gaze shifted briefly to Bella, who suddenly found her champagne glass very interesting. "Philip's rejoining the firm," Gordon declared with a hearty laugh. "We've been working out the details for months, quietly, of course." Daniel's face remained pleasantly neutral, though his instincts were sounding alarms. "What role will he be taking?" Daniel asked casually. Gordon and Philip exchanged a quick, knowing look. "We'll dive into that tomorrow," Gordon said, brushing the question aside. "Tonight, we party." Throughout the evening, Daniel watched, never relaxing. He caught the furtive glances, the silent communication between Bella and Philip. Years of surviving dangerous, high-stakes missions had honed his instincts, and those instincts told him something was very wrong. Just after midnight, once the last guest had said their goodbyes, Daniel found Bella in the study, huddled with Gordon and Philip in low, urgent conversation. They fell silent the moment he stepped inside. "Perfect timing," Gordon said with an overly bright smile. "We were just discussing plans for tomorrow." "On my birthday?" Daniel asked lightly, pretending to be amused. "I'm flattered." Nobody laughed. Later, with Bella lying stiffly beside him in bed, Daniel finally unlocked Tobias's encrypted message. "They've been setting this up for months. Bella's been shifting money. Philip's been back 2 months already. Each Tuesday, they met at the Princeton Hotel. I can prove it. Every single detail is documented. Contact me." Daniel closed his eyes, the missed warnings flashing through his mind like fire. All the coincidences he had once brushed off now stood out as glaring red flags, the vague excuses she gave for her absences, the subtle but undeniable changes in her behavior. In the stillness, a dangerous smile began to tug at Daniel's lips. They had no idea what they had set in motion. The morning after his birthday party, Daniel woke before the sky had even begun to lighten, slipping away from the sleeping form of Bella beside him. He headed downtown to his private office, not the polished one at Stanton Holdings, but the secret space he maintained for matters requiring absolute discretion. Inside, Tobias Reed waited, looking almost out of place in the Spartan office behind the clean-lined desk. Tobias, once the most lethal asset in their elite squad, now masked his formidable abilities under the guise of bespoke suits and a respected cybersecurity business. "How bad is it?" Daniel asked directly, wasting no time. In silence, Tobias slid a tablet across the desk. "They've been careful. Bella's been seeing Philip in secret for 6 months. 3 months ago, Gordon quietly brought Philip back in as a so-called consultant. The transfer of assets you co-own has been gradual but consistent. Today, the board plans to vote Philip into the chief investment officer role. Your position." Tobias's voice was low, almost deadly. "They're also getting ready to trigger the professional misconduct clause in your prenup," he added grimly. Daniel flicked through the files on the tablet, photos, text conversations, financial reports, his expression unreadable, though the growing coldness in his eyes betrayed him. "You're not surprised," Tobias observed. "I suspected," Daniel replied flatly. Now I know for sure. He placed the device down with careful precision. What else? For the past several weeks, Gordon's been poisoning the board's perception of your strategies, Tobias continued. They sabotaged 3 client accounts, creating artificial losses to frame you. He handed Daniel a separate folder. Drafted divorce papers, he added. Daniel skimmed through the documents, noting with clinical detachment the calculated method behind their betrayal. They plan to dismantle me publicly before they destroy me in private. What's the plan? Tobias asked. Daniel leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him, deep in thought. First, we secure my holdings, transfer everything into contingency protections. Then, I walk into that board meeting pretending I'm still in the dark. Finally, Daniel's mouth curled into an arctic smile, I start dismantling them piece by piece. When Daniel entered the Stanton Holdings boardroom, the air was charged with quiet anticipation. At the head of the table, Gordon presided, with Philip lounging smugly in the seat that was supposed to belong to Daniel. Bella, conspicuously present, sat nearby. Daniel, Gordon said curtly, we've already begun. Without a word, Daniel took the remaining chair, carefully distant from the table's center of power. By all means, continue. Clearing his throat, Gordon pressed on. As I was saying, recent outcomes from certain portfolios under current management have raised serious concerns. Philip launched into his presentation, showcasing falsified data meant to depict thriving investments as disastrous failures. Daniel listened, impassive, as they twisted his successes into supposed liabilities. When Philip concluded, Gordon turned toward Daniel with a look of feigned courtesy. Care to respond? Daniel rose slowly, fastening the button of his jacket with deliberate ease. Just one question, he said smoothly. When did you all agree Philip would make a more convenient son-in-law? A stunned silence seized the room. Gordon's face flushed an angry red. This is a business discussion, Daniel, he said sharply. Let's keep it professional. Daniel stepped forward, voice calm but sharp as a blade. Then you won't mind explaining why the performance metrics were falsified and why client funds were misappropriated to fabricate losses. That's absurd, Philip blurted. Ignoring him completely, Daniel addressed the rest of the board. Review the real transaction records, compare them with the reports filed with regulators. You'll see the discrepancies yourselves. Gordon looked like he might explode. These are serious accusations, he began. They're facts, Daniel interrupted coldly. Full documentation has already been turned over to our compliance team and the SEC. A visible wave of concern passed among the board members. I made sure to clarify that the board had no knowledge of any wrongdoing, Daniel added. Gordon abruptly pushed his chair back and stood. This meeting is over, he barked. Daniel, my office, now. Inside Gordon's private office, the older man's mask of control disintegrated. You ungrateful son of a bitch, he spat. You'd be nothing without me. I made you. Daniel remained utterly calm, his gaze glacial. Is that what you tell yourself? It's the truth, Gordon snapped. Bella rescued you from obscurity. You were nobody, just a math whiz with nothing to your name. We gave you everything. Daniel's stare hardened. Is that why you think you can take it all back? Gordon jabbed a finger into Daniel's chest. The board has always been on my side. By this time tomorrow you'll be finished. Daniel tilted his head slightly, almost thoughtfully. Maybe. But here's a question you should ask yourself. He stepped forward, voice lowering to a deadly calm. How well do you really know the man you just tried to destroy? His voice dropped to a hushed murmur. What if I'm not the man you think I am? Something flickered in Daniel's expression that made Gordon instinctively retreat a step. You're bluffing, Gordon said, though a slight waver betrayed his uncertainty. We'll find out soon enough, Daniel replied under his breath. He turned toward the door, but paused before stepping out. Oh, one more thing. While you and Bella were busy plotting this little betrayal, did it slip your minds that tonight was supposed to be my birthday? Reservation at Le Cirque and everything? Just curious. Without waiting for a response, Daniel exited, leaving Gordon rooted to the floor as a growing unease crept over him. While driving, Daniel glanced at his phone and noticed a message from Bella. "Where are you? We need to talk." "Be home soon," he texted back. "It's time to stop pretending." When Daniel arrived, he found Bella pacing their living room, still dressed impeccably in her tailored business suit. The moment she saw him, her nervous energy sharpened into a cold, unwavering determination. "Dad called," she said, getting straight to the point. "He says you're making some very serious allegations." "Not allegations, facts," Daniel corrected, loosening his tie without sitting down. "Though I'd love to hear which version he spun for you." Bella folded her arms tightly, her manicured nails tapping against the fabric of her sleeves. "He claims you're threatening to fabricate evidence and sabotage Philip's promotion out of jealousy." "Jealousy?" Daniel repeated flatly. "Jealousy over the man you've been sleeping with behind my back for the past 6 months? I'd say that's a bit redundant, don't you think?" For a moment, Bella visibly paled, but she quickly composed herself. "That's ridiculous," she said in a clipped tone. "The Princeton Hotel. Tuesdays at noon, sometimes Fridays too if I was out of town." Daniel calmly removed his jacket, folding it over a nearby chair. "Shall I continue? Or have we finally dropped the act?" Shock flickered briefly across Bella's face before she masked it with icy composure. "You had me followed?" she demanded. "I anticipated it," Daniel said matter-of-factly. "Especially after catching wind of the plan to steal my clients and undermine my position." He poured himself a drink with unhurried precision. "What I still can't figure out is, why the pretense? Why not just file for divorce when you made your choice?" Bella hesitated, her eyes calculating behind a guarded stare. "It's complicated." "No," Daniel said coolly. "It's simple. You and Philip needed my name, my influence, to build your father's empire. You had to cement those connections before you could afford to toss me aside." Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Daniel opened it to reveal Gordon and Philip, both with grim, set faces. "Perfect timing," Daniel said, stepping aside to let them in. "We're just getting to the best part." Gordon strode in, radiating fury, while Philip followed stiffly, tension thrumming beneath his calm exterior. "You think you're clever?" Gordon snarled. "You're finished. The board's calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. 1 vote and you're done. Not just here, but everywhere. No one will touch you." Daniel smiled faintly, almost pityingly. "Will that happen before or after the SEC opens a formal investigation into the altered portfolios? Could complicate your timeline." "There's no evidence," Philip snapped, cutting him off. "Is that so?" Daniel said, his voice smooth as silk. "Interesting, because Tobias sent a rather thorough file to our compliance team this morning, original transaction logs included. The ones you thought were erased? Fascinating read." Gordon's face darkened, blotches of red rising in his cheeks. "This is your last chance," he growled. "Walk away quietly, and maybe we'll let you leave with your dignity." Bella moved closer to Gordon and Philip, aligning herself unmistakably with them. With a practiced motion, she pulled an envelope from her handbag and thrust it at Daniel. "My wife serves me divorce papers at my birthday party," Daniel said dryly, accepting the envelope but leaving it unopened. "Classy move." "We're done," Bella said, her voice cold and final. "Dad's promoting my ex to your job. Congratulations." "Pack your office," Gordon added grimly. "Be out by morning." Daniel surveyed them one by one, his face unreadable. Saying nothing, he placed the envelope carefully on the coffee table, then walked to the bar to refill his glass. "What's the matter? Nothing to say?" Philip taunted. "Oh, I have plenty to say," Daniel replied, raising his drink. But words are cheap. Actions, on the other hand, they count. He paused, then said casually, "As of this morning, I no longer work at Stanton Holdings." Gordon barked a harsh laugh. "You can't quit. You're fired." "Call it whatever makes you feel better," Daniel said with a shrug. "But the important news? 30 minutes ago, Wilcox Global completed the buyout of controlling shares in McAllister Technologies, Vanguard Dynamics, and Brightway Systems." Gordon's face drained of color. "That's not possible. Those are our biggest tech holdings." "Were," Daniel corrected, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Their boards voted unanimously for the sale after learning some disturbing facts about Stanton's leadership. Curiously enough, it was the same trio of portfolios that bore the brunt of those fabricated losses. Did you really think the CEOs would not start returning my calls after you tampered with their stock prices?" Gordon appeared to visibly shrink under the weight of realization. "You can't be serious. Those accounts make up nearly half of our assets," he protested. "Technically, it's 37.6%, Daniel interjected, casually swirling the remnants of his drink before setting the glass down. "But who's counting?" He flashed them a brief, nonchalant nod. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have dinner waiting on me." "This conversation isn't over," Bella hissed, her jaw clenched tight. Daniel paused in the doorway, throwing a final glance over his shoulder. "You're right," he said with silky calm. "It's just beginning." His smile was razor thin. "You might want to keep those phones close tomorrow. The press would soon have a feeding frenzy." I remained there, solitary, in the place we once called our stronghold. Watching them through the security cameras, I saw them pile into Gordon's car, urgently tapping away at their phones. Their intricate plot was already unraveling at the seams. At midnight, I powered down my phone, fully aware that the real chaos would erupt with the morning light. By dawn, headlines would blare about the staggering financial collapse of Stanton Holdings. Before noon, the SEC would formally announce an investigation. By evening, they would finally grasp just how deeply they had betrayed me. But that reckoning could wait. Tobias was expecting me at our undisclosed location, equipped with everything needed for the next phase. "They still have no idea who you actually are, do they?" Tobias asked as I entered. "Not yet," I replied with an icy smile. "But soon enough, they will." 3 full days slipped by with Daniel refusing every attempt to reach him. Meanwhile, the empire Stanton Holdings had built crumbled spectacularly. The SEC officially launched an investigation. Their stock plummeted by 40%. Major clients started terminating their contracts en masse, and Daniel Novak? He remained a ghost. Hidden deep within a reinforced warehouse in an industrial district, Daniel monitored the downfall from a high-tech operations hub. Tobias managed a team of 6, trusted veterans who had once served alongside Daniel on other covert missions. "Bella's tried calling 23 times, Tobias reported, scanning the logs. "Gordon's up to 34. Phillips called 16 times too," he added, raising an eyebrow. "You've got voicemails stacked on every number tied to you." Daniel simply nodded, his gaze locked onto the bank of surveillance monitors. One feed showed SEC agents hauling out boxes of documents from Stanton Holdings headquarters. Another displayed a disheveled Gordon stepping into his lawyer's office. "The prenup has a morality clause," Monica Reyes announced as she strode in, tablet in hand. Once an elite intelligence analyst, Monica now ran digital ops for Daniel's team. Bella's infidelity voids most of her legal protections. "Your attorney says the divorce terms will favor you." "What about the asset movements?" Daniel asked, never taking his eyes off the screens. "Blocked and reversed," Monica confirmed. "Their attempt to reroute your shared holdings triggered automatic fraud protocols. Everything's frozen and under investigation." Daniel finally turned to face a massive wall map, a detailed chart of his secret global holdings, properties, companies, financial accounts, all buried under layers of shell corporations. Long before Bella entered his orbit, He had already constructed a formidable fortune through Axiom Global, operating under a slew of aliases. "Status in Asia?" he queried, addressing Derek Ward, his international finance expert. "We absorbed the initial shocks," Derek replied confidently. "Singapore reports stability. Also, the Chong Group has accepted your partnership offer." Daniel gave a small nod of approval. "And the Stanton liability report?" Monica tapped through more files. "Gordon's drowning. He's maxed out credit, mortgaged 3 properties, and financed a yacht he can't afford. Without the tech portfolio, he's headed for collapse." "And Philip?" Daniel asked. "Neck deep in gambling debt," Monica said. "Roughly $3 million split between Vegas and Macau. Bella's been embezzling too. She's funneled steady transfers into an offshore Cayman account. Balance currently sits at $12 million. "Money she stole from our accounts," Daniel said, voice cold as steel. "Package all the evidence for the prosecutors." Just then, the steel door creaked open, and Vincent Cruz strode in. A formidable figure, once Daniel's handler in Black Ops, now his chief strategist. "They're scrambling," Vincent reported curtly. "Gordon's been calling contacts at the State Department, trying to dig up dirt on you." Daniel chuckled under his breath. "And they pretended not to know who I was, right?" Vincent smirked. "Officially, you're just another obscure financial consultant." "Exactly what I wanted," Daniel said, returning his focus to the operations center. "Now what's the word on the offshore funds?" "We've traced the entire network," Monica replied crisply. "Stanton Holdings laundered approximately $80 million through shell corporations into hidden personal accounts. Years of siphoning company money. And tomorrow morning," Vincent added, "the SEC gets it all wrapped in a bow." "Perfect," Daniel said, checking the time. "Let's set the next step in motion." He pulled a secure phone from a hidden compartment, one he hadn't used in over 5 years, and dialed Gordon Stanton's private line. Gordon answered almost instantly. "Daniel? Where the hell have you been? Do you even understand what's happening right now?" "I have a fairly accurate picture," Daniel replied in a level voice. "And you, Gordon? Holding up all right?" "Drop the performance," Gordon barked. "The SEC is gutting my offices like scavengers. I've already lost 3 major clients. The board is breathing down my neck, demanding I step down. Fix this." "Fix what exactly?" Daniel responded with chilling calm. "The forged trades you signed off on? The client portfolios you tampered with? Or your daughter's little extracurricular adventures?" Gordon's voice lowered, dark with rage. "Listen carefully, you ungrateful little bastard. I don't know what you're trying to pull." "No tricks," Daniel cut in sharply. "Only consequences." He let the words hang for a moment. "By the way," Daniel added casually, "when you welcomed Philip back into the fold, did you ever stop to wonder where he vanished for those 3 years?" Silence. "What are you insinuating?" Gordon demanded. "His tenure at Meridian Global," Daniel said smoothly. "The sudden exit. The client funds that conveniently disappeared under his watch. Fascinating history." "You're bluffing," Gordon hissed, though a flicker of uncertainty crept into his tone. "Am I?" Daniel said mildly. "Maybe ask him about the Liechtenstein accounts? Or don't. It might save you the shock when the prosecutors come knocking." Gordon's breathing grew louder, heavier. "What do you want?" he finally rasped. "Nothing you can give," Daniel said, voice cold and remote. "Check your inbox in 10 minutes. You'll find it educational." He ended the call and gave a slight nod to Monica, who promptly hit send on the carefully assembled email. A full dossier of Philip's financial crimes, complete with bank details, transaction logs, and indisputable evidence. "How long until he calls Philip?" Tobias asked quietly. 5 minutes max," Daniel answered without hesitation. "And the voicemail count? 78 and climbing." In just 3 days, Gordon had left 78 increasingly desperate voicemails, a clear signal they finally grasped Daniel's true hand. Allowing himself the faintest, coldest smile, Daniel said, "It's time they understood. Bring the car around," he instructed. For 5 years, Daniel had constructed the perfect illusion for the Stanton, a brilliant financial advisor, the ideal son-in-law, a man whose past was neatly scrubbed before his MBA. Now, the curtain was coming down. An hour later, he entered Stanton Holdings for the first time since his birthday. The security guards faltered, recognizing him, but unsure whether to intervene. His confident stride left no room for doubt. Daniel took the executive elevator straight to the top floor. Inside Gordon's office, Gordon, Bella, and Philip clustered around each other, their tense conversation dying the instant Daniel appeared. "Daniel?" Bella gasped, standing so quickly her chair nearly toppled. Even with heavy makeup, the exhaustion showed through. "Where have you been? We've been trying to contact you for days." "I know," Daniel said coolly, lingering at the threshold. 78 messages, impressive tenacity. Gordon looked wrecked, his complexion ashen. "Did you send those documents?" "About Philip?" he asked hoarsely. Philip's face twisted into rage. "Whatever he sent, it's lies," he snapped. "He's trying to tear us apart. The Liechtenstein accounts are no fantasy," Daniel said, his tone even. "Nor are the unauthorized fund movements you helped execute. Law enforcement agencies in 3 countries have been building a case for 2 years now. You lying son of a—" Philip exploded, lunging at him. Daniel sidestepped easily, watching with disdain as Philip stumbled into the desk. "Violence, Philip?" "How utterly typical," Daniel remarked, smoothing his cuffs with indifference. Bella quickly stepped forward, shifting into the charming persona she used to manipulate outcomes. "Daniel, please," she said softly. "This is spiraling out of control. Let's talk. Privately." "We're talking," Daniel replied flatly. "Though I must ask, what changed? 3 days ago, you were eager to finalize our divorce." "The situation has evolved," Gordon interrupted hastily. "We can reach a deal that's beneficial to everyone." Daniel raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering across his features. "A deal? After you tried to ruin my career, destroy my reputation, and rob me blind? What could you possibly offer?" Gordon swiped a shaky hand across his forehead, sweat gleaming. "The board meets tomorrow. They're desperate for a scapegoat. It doesn't have to be me. You could return, as CEO. Philip would be out of the picture. You'd have full command," Gordon added quickly. "And the divorce proceedings?" Daniel asked, eyes locking on Bella. She hesitated, visibly weighing her options. "We could reconsider," she offered carefully. "We had 5 strong years together, Daniel," she coaxed. "One mistake shouldn't erase all of that." "One mistake?" Daniel echoed, his voice a blade of ice. "Is that what you call 6 months of deceit? Systematic destruction of my career? Theft of our shared assets?" Bella blanched, her mouth opening and closing with no words coming out. "I don't know what you're talking about," Daniel said calmly. "The Cayman account? The $12 million that was funneled away little by little over 2 years?" He pivoted to face Gordon fully. "Were you even aware your daughter planned to disappear with Philip once they succeeded in bringing me down? The property records from Buenos Aires revealed a meticulously plotted escape." The shock on Gordon's face told Daniel all he needed to know. His voice remained even as he continued. "You never actually understood who I was. You only saw the persona I let you see, a capable financial advisor with no inconvenient ties. Did it never occur to you to question why someone with my credentials would settle for a second-rate job at your lackluster firm?" Gordon's voice cracked, brimming with rage and confusion. "What are you getting at?" Daniel's voice hardened. "I'm telling you that before I ever launched Axiom Global. Yes, the same Axiom Global operating across 11 countries. I spent almost 10 years in covert operations, completing assignments you'll never read about. I'm telling you, the man you tried to dismantle commands resources you can't even begin to imagine." A thick silence settled over the room. "Why?" Bella asked in a fragile whisper. If you had all of that, why marry me? Why work for my father? For a moment, something almost gentle flickered across Daniel's face. Because 5 years ago, I truly thought you were different, he said in a low voice. I believed what we had was real. Then, the softness vanished, replaced by cold certainty. Obviously, I was wrong. He started toward the door, then stopped just short of leaving. Tomorrow's board meeting will proceed without any of you. Every member of the board now has irrefutable proof of your financial crimes. By this time tomorrow, Stanton Holdings will have new leadership. You can't just take it all, Gordon bellowed. This company is my life's work. You should have considered that before you tried to obliterate mine, Daniel replied, his tone lethal. He gave one final look back. And Gordon? Those offshore accounts you've been quietly fattening? Law enforcement is very interested in their origins. As Daniel strode away, Bella hurried after him. Daniel, wait! Whatever you think happened, we can fix it. He turned back, regarding the woman he had once loved but now saw clearly, the ambition that had hidden behind her beauty. There's nothing to repair, Bella. It's already finished. By the following morning, every major financial news outlet was ablaze with the story. Gordon Stanton had stepped down as CEO of Stanton Holdings amidst serious allegations of fraud. An interim management team was installed as investigations ramped up. The company's stock nosedived another 15%. Inside Daniel's fortified operations center, Monica debriefed the team. Philip Walker was arrested at Teterboro Airport, she reported. Authorities seized his passport and all electronic devices. Bella has holed up at the Stanton estate in Greenwich, and Gordon is locked in meetings with his lawyers. Daniel reviewed the fresh financial reports. What's our current position with Stanton Holdings? Derek answered promptly. Through proxy investors, we control 23%. It's not total ownership, but enough influence to steer major decisions. And the Chong deal? Daniel asked. Moving ahead, Derek said. They'll announce next week they're acquiring Stanton's Asian portfolio at 30 cents on the dollar. Vincent entered with a fresh update. The Greenwich estate is buzzing, heightened security, trucks coming and going. Looks like they're locking everything down. That's to be expected, Daniel replied. They're bracing for the inevitable. And Ophelia? He added. Still in place, Vincent said. Gordon's been working the phones, trying to pull favors with politicians and lean on the SEC. Ophelia Monroe, who had been embedded years earlier as an event coordinator for the Stanton, had become one of their most trusted insiders, while secretly feeding Daniel crucial intelligence. The Rockland Holdings deal is sealed, Tobias reported from across the room. We now hold the debt on Gordon's house and yacht. The balloon payments come due next month. Daniel approached the digital war map projected across the wall. We accelerate now. The more we pressure them, the more mistakes they'll make. He turned to Vincent. Deploy the media strategy. Vincent hesitated for a split second. Are you absolutely sure? Once we move, there's no going back. They made their choice, Daniel said flatly. Now they'll understand the cost. By noon, the news cycle exploded with another devastating revelation. An anonymous whistleblower had delivered overwhelming evidence linking Gordon Stanton and Philip Walker to years of embezzlement, client theft, and tax evasion. The Department of Justice confirmed it had launched a formal criminal investigation. At 3:00 p.m. sharp, Daniel's phone vibrated. Bella's name lit up the screen. He placed the call on speaker so the whole team could hear. You have to stop this, she sobbed, voice shaking. Dad's lawyer says he could go to prison. This is too much. Is it? Daniel replied, his voice as cold and unforgiving as ice. You and your father didn't hesitate to try and destroy my reputation, my career, and everything I built. So tell me, why should I offer you mercy when you never extended the same? This isn't you, she said urgently. Not the Daniel I once knew. The Daniel you knew, he interrupted coldly, was a carefully constructed illusion, for your sake alone. He added, The real Daniel Novak is someone else entirely. Then show me, she demanded. Who are you really? The man dismantling your life, one piece at a time, he answered smoothly. The same man who warned your father to double-check his facts before making threats. Her voice sharpened into something fiercer. You won't win, she snapped. My father has allies in places you wouldn't even think to look. People who make problems disappear. Even problems like you. Is that supposed to scare me, Bella? He asked, voice even. It's not a warning, it's reality, she bit out. You've made enemies far beyond your reach. Walk away now, or you'll wish you had. Daniel allowed himself a thin, unseen smile from his side of the call. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Thanks for confirming it. You just proved what I suspected about your father's history with criminal operations. There was a pause, brief but tense. What are you even talking about? She demanded. This conversation, Daniel said, voice calm and unhurried, is being legally recorded as evidence in an active federal investigation. Your threats, he continued, will fit nicely into the prosecutor's case file. Bella didn't reply immediately. Several long seconds passed before she finally spoke, her voice uncertain. You're bluffing. Your family loves to believe that, Daniel replied lightly. They're usually wrong. He continued almost casually. As for those powerful connections your father is relying on, the ones he thinks will clean up this situation, 2 are working as federal informants, a 3rd is embedded deep undercover. Want me to go on? The call ended abruptly with a decisive click. At the surveillance hub, Tobias looked up from his station. She's calling Gordon. Their home security just switched to high alert, locked doors, extra guards everywhere. Exactly as planned, Daniel said, unfazed. Now they'll be so focused on outside threats, they won't realize the real danger is already inside their walls. He turned to Vincent. Is Ophelia ready? She's in place, Vincent confirmed. She has full access to Gordon's office and his private files. Tell her to start pulling documents, Daniel ordered. Prioritize offshore accounts and anything linking them to Russian interests. Over the next 2 days, Daniel's team moved with practiced precision, executing a plan years in the making. Financial ties were severed, strategic relationships turned poisonous. The documents Ophelia extracted were explosive, irrefutable evidence of Gordon's laundering operations through Eastern European criminal networks. By the 3rd day, just as Daniel was preparing the final strike, Gordon lashed out. 3 men in dark suits arrived at Axiom Global's headquarters, posing as government regulators. They demanded access to internal records and client information. But Simon King, Daniel's head of security and a former FBI agent, met them at the door. Calmly, he requested their IDs. Under UV light, their credentials revealed themselves as forgeries. Exposed, the fake agents retreated, captured clearly on the building's security footage as they fled. Facial recognition confirms 2 of them are former intelligence contractors, Monica reported. The 3rd works for a private company tied to the Voznesensky Group. More Russian connections, Vincent said grimly. Gordon's panicking, Daniel said, unfazed. And he should be, Daniel added. Tomorrow, the Justice Department gets everything Ophelia found. He studied the surveillance photos carefully. They'll try again, but next time, they'll be more careful. Sure enough, later that night, a second, more sophisticated attack came, this time targeting Daniel's personal residence. 2 operatives bypassed his building's defenses and slipped into his penthouse. Waiting for them inside was Tobias. The confrontation was quick and decisive. Both intruders were neutralized, stripped of weapons and equipment. When they refused to name their employer, Tobias showed them photographs, one of a man's wife picking up their child from school, another of an aging mother in a care home. We know everything about you, Tobias said quietly. Help us, or you'll bring the consequences down on your families too. Realizing their lives, and the lives of their loved ones, were in danger. the men confessed. The trail led straight back to Gordon, though obscured by layers of middlemen. By sunrise, Daniel's team had secured full audio recordings, wire transfers, and sworn testimonies directly tying Gordon to the intimidation attempt. "We have everything we need," Vincent reported. "Prosecutors are standing by." Daniel glanced at his watch. Then it's time for the final play. The Stanton estate in Greenwich sprawled over 12 acres of manicured grounds, centered by a grand colonial mansion that had once hosted presidents, billionaires, and celebrities. Now, it resembled a fortress. Guards patrolled constantly. No one entered without clearance. Yet Daniel walked in unhindered, nodding at the very guards posted to keep him out. Inside the opulent living room, he found Gordon, Bella, and a visibly rattled Philip. Gordon's lawyer, Henry Weller, sat stiffly by the fireplace, a pile of legal documents spread across the table. "How the hell did you get in here?" Gordon roared, jumping to his feet. Daniel spoke with cool confidence. "Your chief of security, Mr. Polson, has been secretly on my payroll for 3 years, along with nearly half of your household staff." Gordon's face flushed a furious crimson. "You infiltrated my home? My private life?" "Quite efficiently," Daniel replied, settling himself casually into a chair without waiting for an invitation. "Though honestly, you didn't make it all that hard. When people feel underappreciated," he added with a shrug, "it's astonishing how fast their loyalties change." For the first time, Bella's polished composure began to crack. Shadows underlined her eyes, and her hands trembled almost imperceptibly. "What more could you possibly want?" she asked in a broken whisper. "Haven't you done enough?" "Enough?" Daniel echoed, lifting a brow in feigned astonishment. "Oh, I'm just getting warmed up." He turned his focus to the lawyer, continuing smoothly. "Mr. Weller, I assume your presence means we're here to talk damage control?" "Let me save you some outrageous legal fees," Daniel said dryly. "This situation isn't something you can sweep away." Weller cleared his throat awkwardly, anxiety bleeding through. "Mr. Novak, my clients are prepared to offer substantial concessions to put an end to this conflict. Full divorce terms, dictated entirely by you. Complete authority over all affiliated companies," Weller pressed on. "A public announcement to restore your reputation." Daniel let out a dry, joyless laugh. "How generous of you. And in return?" "You end this madness," Gordon snapped. "You shut down the federal investigation," he added, voice rough. "Let us salvage what's left of our careers, our names." Daniel studied each of them carefully. Gordon, barely holding back his rage. Bella, trembling and fraying under the pressure. Philip, pale and frozen with terror. These were the people who had plotted behind his back, discarded him when he no longer served their needs, treating him like garbage to be thrown away. "There's something none of you ever bothered to ask," Daniel said quietly after a pause. "Not once. Not even after all those desperate calls and frantic messages." Bella's voice was wary. "What's that?" "Why?" Daniel said simply. "Why would someone like me willingly marry into a family like yours? Why would I put up with Gordon's constant abuse for 5 long years? Why would I dedicate my skills to growing your empire, expanding your power, strengthening your position?" The room grew heavy with silence. "It wasn't because of love," Daniel said, his gaze lingering on Bella a moment too long. "Although love did manage to complicate things. And it certainly wasn't for money or influence," he went on. "I had plenty of both before I ever met any of you." Gordon leaned forward, voice sharp with suspicion. "Then what was it?" "Timothy and Eleanor Kerr," Daniel answered in a low voice. Gordon's expression remained blank, but Weller stiffened visibly, recognition flashing across his features. "Who are they?" Bella asked, frowning. "My parents," Daniel replied. "I was born Daniel Kerr. They owned a small but successful investment firm in the Midwest. 23 years ago, a major New York firm approached them, eager to expand its reach. At first, everything seemed promising, but almost overnight, their clients started disappearing. Whispered rumors began to circulate. Suspicious financial discrepancies appeared in their accounts, discrepancies they couldn't explain or defend. At last, realization crept into Gordon's face. In less than 6 months, everything they had built was destroyed, Daniel said evenly. The New York firm moved in, scooped up their clients, seized their assets for a fraction of their worth. And 3 months after losing everything, my mother took her own life, Daniel continued, his voice eerily calm. My father followed her soon after. I had nothing to do with any of that, Gordon protested weakly, but even he didn't seem convinced. Didn't you? Daniel asked softly. Stanton Acquisitions, 2002. You personally led those negotiations. When my parents rejected your insultingly low offer, you unleashed what your internal memos describe as aggressive competitive tactics. It's all meticulously documented in your confidential files. That was business, Gordon insisted, his voice desperate. It was never personal. Daniel's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. It became personal the moment my parents died. It became personal when I was left alone at 18 because of your business. Bella stared at him, horrified. You married me to get revenge? I married you to learn, Daniel corrected coldly. To study how your father operates. To understand the machinery of destruction your family controls so effortlessly. He turned a blade-sharp gaze on Gordon. And yes, ultimately, to dismantle that machine piece by piece. You're insane, Philip choked out, his voice trembling. No, Daniel replied, his tone steady. I'm precise. Everything you're seeing now, the federal raids, the mass client departures, the key staff placements, was set in motion long before I ever set foot in your world. Gordon slumped back in his chair, defeated. What happens now? He croaked. Daniel stood, his voice hard as steel. At this very moment, federal agents are raiding every Stanton Holdings property. They're seizing hard drives, documents, and every last scrap of evidence tying you to illegal offshore dealings and Russian money laundering. Warrants were being served across all your properties. Daniel checked his watch. In less than 20 minutes, they'd be arriving here as well. Weller's face had gone ghostly, stricken with shock. This is nothing less than a witch hunt, he whispered. We'll fight this, someone said determinedly. With what resources? Daniel asked coolly. Stanton Holdings' stock has nosedived by 60%. Your investors are fleeing. He shifted his gaze toward Philip. Your accounts are frozen. Your reputation is in ruins, Daniel added, and your chief strategist is drowning in his own legal troubles. You've destroyed everything, Bella said in a voice brittle with grief. Daniel's expression didn't waver. No, he said, voice icy and measured. I've only ensured that you finally face the reckoning you earned, for all the damage you've done, both in the past and now. You tried to annihilate me without a second thought. Did you really believe I would simply roll over? A sound outside made them turn toward the window. Several black SUVs marked with federal emblems were rolling up the driveway. Daniel calmly reached into his jacket. One last thing, he said, setting a small flash drive down on the table. This holds evidence that could reduce some of the charges against you, Bella. Not all, but a few. You're free to use it, or not. Bella's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Why help me at all? She demanded. Daniel's voice softened slightly. Because there was a time when I believed in what we could have been, he said. Consider it my final act of acknowledgement for what we lost. As the federal agents neared the entrance, Daniel moved toward the door. This won't bring your parents back, Gordon called after him, a desperate attempt to land one last blow. Daniel paused but didn't turn around. No, he said quietly, but it guarantees you'll never destroy another family the way you destroyed mine. He glanced over his shoulder one final time. Goodbye, Gordon. Goodbye, Bella. As he stepped away, the agents' voices rang out, announcing their authority as the once mighty Stanton Empire crumbled around them. 5 years of careful planning and relentless patience had brought Daniel to this moment. It didn't feel like a victory, nor did it feel like justice, but it felt final. Out in the driveway, Tobias sat waiting, engine humming. "Is it done?" Tobias asked as Daniel slid into the passenger seat. "It's done," Daniel replied, casting one last glance as the Stanton were led away. "What now?" Tobias prompted, curious. For so long, Daniel's life had been consumed by the mission of taking down the empire that ruined his family. Now, with it finished, what was left? "Now we rebuild," Daniel answered after a pause. "There are still others suffering because of people like Gordon." "New mission?" Tobias asked, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Something like that," Daniel said. "Something better." As the car pulled away, Daniel didn't look back. The past was over. Before him lay a future free of old shadows. 2 weeks later. The Stanton scandal still dominated the front pages, each day uncovering even deeper rot at the heart of the once celebrated corporation. Gordon and Philip remained locked up, bail denied, as they were deemed extreme flight risks. Bella, confined under house arrest with a monitor strapped to her ankle, was crammed into a dingy apartment, her fortune frozen pending trial. From the glass-clad tower of his new firm overlooking Manhattan, Daniel watched from a distance. Axiom Global had exploded onto the global financial scene, quickly building a reputation as a rising powerhouse. Reporters scrambled to piece together the story of Daniel Novak, or, as some called him now, Daniel Kerr, the man whose personal crusade had shattered one of the industry's titans. Vincent walked into Daniel's office, a tablet in hand. "The Justice Department is asking for another meeting," Vincent said. "They're moving forward with a RICO case against Gordon, and they've uncovered more about his Russian connections." Without lifting his eyes from the data scrolling across his screen, Daniel nodded. "Book it for Thursday." "And Stanton Holdings?" Vincent asked. "The interim board's trying to steady the company. They offered us their European division at a deep discount." "Pass," Daniel said immediately. "Let Chong take it off their hands. They'll have fewer regulations to deal with overseas." Vincent shifted, clearly uneasy. "There's something else," he said. "Bella's been trying to get in contact with you. She's gone through her attorney, old acquaintances, even tried to corner Tobias yesterday." Daniel's face remained unreadable. "What does she want?" "She claims she has information you'll want to hear. Something she hid, even from Gordon." Daniel's voice was flat. "She's desperate, facing total financial ruin and years in prison. She'll say anything to buy time." "Maybe," Vincent said with a nod. "But we've seen some strange patterns. She's made multiple trips to a safety deposit box at First National, and she's been calling burner phones late at night. The monitoring unit considered the issue significant." Daniel paused, thinking it through. "What's your assessment?" he asked. "I believe she's hiding something," the agent replied thoughtfully. "Either something she can use to negotiate or something dangerous enough to serve as a weapon." Daniel gave a curt nod. "Understood. Tell Monica to arrange a meeting point. Full security protocol. Surveillance ready. She gets 15 minutes, no more." The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon, inside a secluded private room at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan, a place chosen for its neutrality and discretion. Daniel arrived early, giving his team sufficient time to sweep for bugs and security threats. Bella showed up exactly on schedule, escorted by federal marshals who remained stationed outside. She looked like a faded version of the woman Daniel once knew. Expensive designer clothes swapped for a plain suit, no jewelry, and makeup applied heavily in a futile attempt to conceal the exhaustion in her eyes. Yet, she still carried herself with the poised elegance he once admired. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said, taking a seat across the table from him. "Vincent says you have something I should hear," Daniel responded, skipping any pleasantries. You have 15 minutes. Bella studied him for a moment. You've already won, you know, she said. My father will probably spend the rest of his life in prison. Philip is hammering out a plea agreement, she continued. But even so, the Stanton name is finished. Everything it once stood for, destroyed. Is there a reason you're telling me this? Daniel asked, his voice cool and detached. My point is, you've gotten your revenge. You've served your version of justice for what happened to your parents. And? He prompted. She leaned forward, lowering her voice slightly. There's something you don't know. Something that could change everything. Daniel's expression stayed flat. That's a line I've heard before, usually right before someone tries to sell me a lie. Without responding, Bella reached into her handbag and placed a small USB drive on the table between them. This contains information related to your parents' deaths, she said. Data that wasn't part of my father's official records. Information he didn't even realize I had. Daniel didn't move to take it. And where did you get this? He asked, suspicion lacing his words. My mother, Bella answered. Before she passed, she gave me a key to a safety deposit box and told me to open it only if I had no other choice. She gestured toward the USB. What's on there is a copy of what I found 3 years ago. Still, Daniel made no move. And now, suddenly, you're ready to hand it over? I didn't understand the full weight of it until now, Bella admitted. Not until everything started falling apart. She gently pushed the drive closer toward him. It proves my father wasn't acting alone, she continued. He was executing someone else's orders, someone who's still out there. Who? Daniel asked, his voice low. Benjamin White, Bella said. The name settled between them like a heavy stone. Benjamin White, a celebrated investor, renowned philanthropist, and a trusted family friend of the Stanton, a man whose reputation was considered untouchable. That's absurd, Daniel snapped. White had nothing to do with your father's businesses back in 2002. Not officially, Bella said, but he was secretly financing the Stanton acquisition team through a tangled network of shell companies. He picked the targets, your parents' company included. My father was just following instructions. Daniel's eyes sharpened. And I'm just supposed to believe you? Convenient timing, considering you're looking at serious charges yourself. I'm not asking you for mercy, Bella said, her voice unexpectedly steady. There was a rawness in her tone that gave Daniel pause. I know I've done things you can't forgive. I'll pay for them. But White is still out there, doing to others what he did to your family. Don't you want the real truth? The truth, Daniel repeated, the word edged with doubt. Now it matters to you? Bella dropped her gaze. I get why you wouldn't trust me, she said softly. But this isn't about me anymore. It's about you finishing what you started. She rose from her seat. Look at it. Or don't, she said. But my time's up. As she reached for the door, Daniel's voice stopped her. Why now, Bella? After everything? She turned back, and for the first time, he glimpsed a genuine vulnerability on her face. Because, she said, voice trembling slightly, despite all the lies, one thing was always real. I did love you, and the man I loved deserves to know who truly destroyed his family. Once she was gone, Daniel sat in silence, staring at the USB for what felt like forever before finally picking it up. Get Monica on this, he told Vincent, who had been monitoring the meeting from a room nearby. Triple check it. If there's any malware, I want to know before a single file gets opened. You think it's a trap? Vincent asked. I think Bella's running out of options, Daniel said, and desperate people don't usually act out of charity. 6 hours later, Monica returned with her findings. The drive was clean. What it contained was devastating. Hundreds of emails, financial trails, and audio recordings that laid bare Benjamin White's involvement in orchestrating brutal corporate takeovers for over 2 decades. The Kerr dossier became the top priority, with White giving Gordon meticulous directives on how to methodically dismantle the family's enterprise. After exhaustive cross-referencing, Monica confirmed the material's authenticity. These messages mirrored others recovered from Gordon's private files. Voice print analysis matched both Gordon and White, and the financial documentation was consistent with previously established patterns. Daniel reviewed the material in silence, his face betraying no emotion. "What's the call?" Vincent asked quietly. Without missing a beat, Daniel replied, "We verify independently. We're not moving based solely on Bella's testimony. I want confirmation from sources White couldn't possibly have influenced," Daniel added. Over the next few days, his team meticulously traced financial paths and communication records that could substantiate Bella's story. What they uncovered exceeded their worst fears. Over 2 decades, White had systematically destroyed dozens of small financial institutions to secretly build his empire. "It's worse than we imagined," Tobias reported grimly. "White didn't just dismantle your family's legacy," Tobias continued. "He constructed his wealth on the ruins of at least 16 other firms across the country." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And no one connected the dots before now?" he snapped. Monica shook her head. The trails were hidden behind layers of shell corporations and fake entities. Without a specific target, the pattern was almost impossible to detect. "So, what now?" Vincent asked. Daniel turned toward the windows, his gaze sweeping the city skyline. "We expand the mission," he said calmly. "Gordon was just the front. White is the real architect." Vincent's expression darkened. "White's network is massive. Politicians, intelligence operatives, corporate giants. Taking him down won't be as easy as dismantling Gordon's operation." Daniel's mouth curled into a hard smile. "Good. I was starting to worry it would be too simple." The very next morning, Daniel received a secure call from Bella's federal contact. She had disappeared overnight, disabling her tracker without setting off any alarms. A full-scale manhunt was underway. "She anticipated this," Daniel muttered under his breath. "She gave us White's file knowing he'd come after her. She's running from him, not the law." "Should we move to locate her?" Tobias asked. Daniel considered carefully. Bella had handed him the key to a truth he might never have found on his own. "Yes," he said finally. "Find her, before White's men do, and keep her hidden. No one outside our trusted circle even knows she's missing." While his people launched a covert search for Bella, Daniel's focus zeroed in on the real enemy, Benjamin White. Gordon had been a tool. White was the architect. The true adversary was no longer in the shadows. It was time to settle a debt more than 2 decades old. White's 70th birthday celebration was the pinnacle event of the season. Held at his extravagant Hamptons estate, it drew an elite guest list. Senators, billionaires, celebrities, all gathered to toast a man lauded for his business acumen and philanthropy. None suspected that Daniel's agents were already deeply embedded, posing as servers, guards, and attendees. Operating from a clandestine control center in Manhattan, Daniel monitored the festivities through dozens of real-time video feeds. "Our insider confirmed White accepted the delivery," Monica reported. "His private security is inspecting it now." Earlier that day, a package had been discreetly delivered to White's office, a flash drive accompanied by a single note that read, "I know." "He's leaving the main room," Tobias said, tracking White's movements, "headed for his private study with his security chief." Daniel watched intently as White, exuding authority despite his age, dismissed his guards and entered the study alone. Inside, White inserted the flash drive into his personal laptop, just as Daniel had anticipated. Only one file appeared, a video. White clicked play. Daniel's face filled the screen. "Good evening, Mr. White," Daniel's recorded voice began. "We haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. My name is Daniel Kerr. Perhaps you remember my parents, Timothy and Eleanor Kerr. On the live surveillance feed, White's expression shifted from puzzlement to shock. Yes, Daniel continued in the recording. Those Kellers, the ones whose business you destroyed in early 2002, using Gordon Stanton as your weapon. You've likely noticed Gordon's recent collapse, Daniel's voice said. What you might not realize is that I orchestrated it, the first act of a much larger strategy that now targets you. White reached toward his phone, only to freeze as the voice on the video continued. You're wondering how much I know, Daniel said. The answer? Everything. 16 firms, systematically gutted, families devastated, 3 deaths by suicide, directly linked to your actions. And let's not forget the Russian funds you've laundered through your so-called charitable foundation over the past 10 years. White's face went pale. As you watch this, Daniel's voice went on. Complete dossiers have already been delivered to the FBI, the SEC, and multiple federal prosecutors handling Gordon's case. Additional copies are being sent to every major financial news outlet. From the surveillance command center, Daniel leaned back, watching White's reaction unfold with grim satisfaction. The man looked shaken, though he hadn't surrendered yet. Meanwhile, the footage continued playing. There was still another route available. Exactly 1 hour from now, a call would come through to his private line. If he wanted a chance to soften the inevitable public catastrophe, he would need to pick up. If he chose not to, then so be it. He would be left to face the consequences alone. The screen cut to black. White sat unmoving for several seconds, then slammed his fist against the desk and snatched up his encrypted phone. He's contacting his crisis team, Tobias reported, eyes flicking over the communications feed. He's demanding immediate authentication of the video's source. Right on schedule, Daniel said with a knowing nod. How long until they confirm it's legit, considering the data we seeded? Daniel asked. Maybe 40 minutes. Possibly less, Tobias replied. And Bella? Daniel pressed. She's secure at the Montana compound, Monica said. No digital footprint, no signs she even exists, completely off the grid. 3 days earlier, Daniel had found Bella hiding out in a rundown motel outside Philadelphia. Instead of turning her over to law enforcement, he had made her a different offer, full protection in exchange for her complete cooperation. If she refused, she would face the dangers alone. Bella had accepted, providing intelligence about White's inner circle that became the foundation of Daniel's plan. Exactly 60 minutes after White finished viewing the footage, Daniel dialed his private number. You have my attention, Mr. Kerr, White answered, voice tight but composed. Although your delivery leaves much to be desired. Subtlety is a luxury for people who aren't staring down the clock, Daniel answered coolly. You've already had your experts verify everything, so let's skip the games. A tense pause filled the air. What is it you want? Revenge? White scoffed. Dramatic. If it's money you're after, just name your price. Everyone has a price, isn't that the saying? Daniel shot back. My parents didn't. That's why you had to destroy them instead of buying them off. Silence lingered again. Business is never personal, Mr. Kerr, White said at last. Your parents were simply casualties, unfortunate but necessary for progress. And now, you're standing in the way of something bigger. Daniel's voice turned sharp and cold. Tell me, White, how does it feel knowing the empire you built is about to crumble beneath you? You overestimate yourself, White said, some of his confidence creeping back. I've weathered worse storms. No one stays at the top of finance for 60 years without backup plans and powerful friends in places you can't touch. I'm counting on those friends, Daniel replied with ease. In fact, each of them has been sent a customized evidence packet. Senator Hartman, Director Cooper at the Bureau, Judge Whitman. Every one of them is tied directly to your corruption. Let's see how loyal they are when their own freedom is at risk. The silence that followed told Daniel he'd struck a vital nerve. You could destroy me, White finally said, voice thick with realization. But in doing so, you'd cause untold damage. Thousands of jobs lost. Charities dependent on my contributions would collapse. Pension funds would vanish. Are you prepared to shoulder that kind of destruction? Daniel's face remained still. Collateral damage, he said, the words heavy with contempt, from the same man who watched my mother end her own life and didn't blink. He let the silence grow before finishing. Your concern for others is irrelevant. What do you propose? White asked sharply. Meet me tomorrow, Daniel said. You'll get the exact location 1 hour before the meeting. Come alone. If you try to bring security, the files go public immediately. And if I comply? White demanded. Then you might have a chance to negotiate something better than ruin and a prison sentence, Daniel said. White's breathing grew heavier. You're awfully confident for someone I hadn't even heard of until last week, he muttered. I've spent 23 years preparing for this, Daniel said quietly. Whether you knew me or not was never the point. After the call ended, Daniel turned back to his team. He'll attempt to trace the call, he said. Already handled, Tobias confirmed. We routed the signal through 17 proxy servers. He'll hit a dead end at a server farm in Singapore. He'll activate his private intelligence network too, Vincent warned. Expect surveillance attempts, and possibly direct attacks if he gets desperate. Let him try, Daniel said calmly. We've been ghosts for years. One more day won't change that. The meeting place Daniel selected carried deep personal meaning. An abandoned bank branch in the Midwest that had once been a regional office for Kerr Financial Services. Now it stood decaying and deserted, a hollow relic of the devastation White had unleashed decades ago. Daniel and his team arrived 6 hours before the meeting to secure the site and set up surveillance across every approach route. By the time White's black sedan pulled into sight, they were fully prepared. True to Daniel's instructions, White arrived alone, though his team had already intercepted and neutralized 3 separate surveillance units positioned near the exits. The aging mogul stepped stiffly from the car, looking strangely vulnerable without his usual layers of protection. Inside the gutted remains of the old bank, Daniel sat waiting behind a battered table, the only object left standing in the hollowed-out space. Murk-stained sunlight filtered through grimy windows, casting rays that stirred the dust in the stagnant air. White scanned the room, his eyes pausing on a crumbling motto still barely visible on the wall. Kerr Financial, building your future together. The cruel humor of it wasn't lost on him. Appropriate, White muttered, sinking into the chair across from Daniel. In its own tragic way. Daniel's voice was low, almost reverent. That's the chair where my father collapsed. After his 3rd meeting with Gordon Stanton, right there, where you're sitting now. It was the moment he realized everything he'd built was being ripped away. White's expression remained impassive. Finance has always been a merciless battlefield, Mr. Kerr. Only the ruthless survive. And the others just get discarded? Is that your justification? Daniel countered sharply. Survival of the fittest. I have no obligation to defend efficient business practices, White said, his tone clipped and cold. And that's not why we're meeting. You mentioned terms, Daniel reminded him, sliding a thick folder across the table. Complete liquidation of your holdings, immediate resignation from every board seat and executive role, a public confession identifying your victims over the past 30 years, and restitution, starting at $50 million per family. White didn't even bother looking at the papers. That's not a negotiation. That's a sentence. It's a kinder fate than most would want for you, Daniel said, voice cool as steel. Some would argue you deserve far worse for the lives lost to your greed. What happens if I say no? Wordlessly, Daniel picked up his phone and tilted it toward White. A draft message sat open, ready to send. One word, proceed. In 30 minutes, evidence of your crimes will flood the inboxes of every major news outlet. Within an hour, federal agents will be kicking in the doors of every property you own. By tomorrow morning, your name will be a national disgrace. White studied Daniel carefully, searching for any trace of doubt. Finding none, he leaned back in his chair with a thin, almost admiring smile. "In a strange way, I respect you," he said thoughtfully. "The patience, the precision. Under different circumstances, you might have made an excellent protege." "I'd sooner be dead," Daniel said flatly without blinking. White inclined his head slightly, almost as if granting a point. "Yes, I suspect you would." He cast a brief glance at the folder. "Before I give you my answer, indulge me one question." "What is it?" "Gordon Stanton's daughter, Bella. What became of her? Why does it matter to you?" White's voice turned almost playful. "Professional curiosity," he said. "Word has it she vanished not long after delivering the evidence against me. Curious timing, wouldn't you say?" Daniel's face stayed carved from stone. "She's none of your concern." "On the contrary," White said, leaning in just a touch. "Bella isn't merely Gordon's daughter. She's also my goddaughter." A faint, knowing smile crossed his lips. "I've known her since she was a child, helped chart her education, shaped her ambitions. Tell me, Daniel, who do you think encouraged her to seek you out after her father's first meeting with you? Who designed the psychological profile that made her irresistible to a man like you?" The words hit like a physical blow, but Daniel's face remained a mask. "You're saying she was part of your scheme all along?" he asked, his voice icy. "Not consciously," White replied with an almost paternal gentleness. "She knew I had an interest in you. She didn't know why. Even Gordon had no idea about our deeper connection. That detail I kept, in reserve, for a moment exactly like this." "You're lying," Daniel shot back, though unease twisted in his gut. White's smile widened. "Am I? Think back. Wasn't it awfully convenient how you met Gordon? Wasn't Bella a little too eager to get close? Tell me, Daniel, does a woman with her pedigree usually fall for a man without the right bloodline?" Daniel said nothing, memories unspooling in his mind. The chance meetings, the rapid intimacy, the easy trust that had opened the door to Stanton's most guarded secrets. "This changes nothing," Daniel said at last, voice like iron. "Perhaps you overestimated your own cleverness. Perhaps not. But the choice remains. Accept the terms, or face the fallout." White observed him for a long moment, eyes glinting with something almost like pity. "Do you know what set your parents apart from the others I ruined?" he asked. "They refused to compromise, not even to save themselves." He shook his head as if disappointed. "Gordon offered them a deal, a minor role, a life of comfort. They chose to lose everything rather than bend. Pride, Mr. Kerr, is a fatal flaw. It blinds men to simple survival." "Sign the papers," Daniel demanded, his voice sharp and final. With a tired sigh, White finally reached out and touched the folder. "You win," he said. "I'll sign, but I have one condition. You're not in a position to ask for anything." "Just hear me out," White said, his hand hovering over the agreement. "I'll comply with everything. I'll confess, I'll pay, I'll give it all up. You're granting me 6 months before the confession goes public, enough time to put my affairs in order and prepare my family," White proposed carefully. Daniel weighed the offer in silence. 3 months, he countered at last. "No extensions. And during that time, you'll be under constant surveillance. If you breach our agreement, it's void immediately." "Agreed," White said with a terse nod, reaching for the pen Daniel had placed in front of him. As Daniel watched his longtime rival sign away his life's achievements, he expected to feel victorious. But instead, a knot of unease tightened inside him, stirred by White's earlier revelations concerning Bella. Had his marriage, the most profound relationship of his life, been yet another piece on White's chessboard? Once White departed, Tobias emerged from an adjacent room where he had been discreetly monitoring the exchange. "You think he told the truth about Bella?" Tobias asked. "It's irrelevant," Daniel replied, his voice steely. The outcome stays the same. Still, as they exited the building, Daniel couldn't resist glancing back at the worn sign that still bore his family's name. For the first time since beginning this long journey of vengeance, a shadow of doubt crept in. Would this truly bring him closure, or were some wounds too deep to ever heal? The 3 months that followed were unexpectedly orderly. Benjamin White meticulously honored the terms. He sold off his holdings, resigned from every seat of influence, and compiled exhaustive records of his financial wrongdoings. Meanwhile, Gordon Stanton and Philip Walker remained behind bars, with fresh evidence continually strengthening the case against them. Bella, held securely at Daniel's remote Montana estate, proved surprisingly cooperative, offering crucial intelligence that tightened the noose around White even further. In his Manhattan office, Daniel reviewed the final checklist ahead of White's confession, which was set to dominate headlines the following day. "The press is standing by," Monica reported crisply. "Every major outlet's ready to release the story simultaneously. Our social media teams are primed to control the narrative." "And the victims' families?" Daniel asked. "We've reached out to all 16, Vincent confirmed. "Anonymous trusts are in place to deliver reparations. They'll know where it came from once the news hits." At that moment, Tobias entered, a secure tablet in hand. "Montana just checked in," he said. "Everything's secure." Daniel acknowledged him with a curt nod, though his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't shake White's insinuations about Bella, no matter how much he tried to dismiss them as manipulative lies. Abruptly, he came to a decision. "I have to see her before the story breaks," he said. Vincent hesitated. "Is that wise?" "It's necessary," Daniel said sharply. "I need answers. Get the jet ready within the hour," he ordered. The Montana estate rose out of the rugged landscape like a fortress of glass and stone. As Daniel's vehicle climbed the winding drive, he took note of how expertly the high-level security had been integrated into the setting. Motion sensors disguised as landscaping lights, cameras hidden in the architecture. Inside, he found Bella seated by the stone fireplace, a book resting lightly in her hands. She looked up, surprise flickering across her features before she masked it with practiced composure. "I didn't expect you," she said, setting the book aside. "Obviously," Daniel said coolly, settling into a chair across from her. "Tomorrow, White's confession goes public. It's over." Bella nodded, slow and deliberate. "And me? What happens to me afterward?" she asked. "That depends," Daniel said, locking eyes with her, "on whether you're ready to tell me the full truth." "I've already shared everything about White's operations," she began, but Daniel cut her off sharply. "Not about White, about us, about how it all started." A flicker of understanding crossed her face. "He told you," she said quietly, "that I was part of the plan from the beginning." "He did," Daniel confirmed. His voice dropped lower. "What I need to know is whether anything between us was ever real." Bella turned away, her gaze drifting toward the mountains framed by the massive windows. Long moments passed before she finally spoke. "Benjamin's my godfather," she said at last. "He's been a presence in my life since childhood. When you first crossed paths with my father," she continued, her voice careful, "Benjamin called me. He told me you were special, someone with exceptional potential, someone our family couldn't afford to ignore." "Did he explain why I was important to him?" Daniel pressed. "No," Bella said, meeting his gaze again. "He just said you had talents that could either be a powerful ally or a dangerous enemy, depending on who earned your loyalty first. And you followed his orders without question?" Daniel asked, bitterness rising in his throat. A flash of anger passed over Bella's face. "I was raised to trust his judgment. In our world, when Benjamin took notice, you didn't ask why. My father didn't. None of us did. So our relationship," Daniel said, his voice flattening, "was manufactured from the start." It wasn't supposed to be, Bella said softly. She hesitated, her next words hanging in the charged air. But what? Daniel demanded. It was never intended to end with marriage, she said quietly. That choice was mine, not my father's, and certainly not his. When she had first shared with Benjamin her desire to marry Daniel, his shock had been unmistakable. Daniel studied her face intently, searching for any trace of deceit. Then, why agree to marry me at all? He asked. Her eyes shifted away, unable to meet his. Because for once, I met someone who saw beyond my name, beyond my place in society, someone who didn't care that I was a Stanton, someone who challenged me to be more than I had ever been. Her tone softened even more. And yes, Daniel, I did love you, she said gently. Whatever else was false, that was always true. Until Philip came back into your life, Daniel remarked with a cold edge. She inclined her head slightly. Until Philip. Until I realized how weary I had grown, worn out by our endless fights, by your intensity, by the feeling that I could never be enough, she admitted, meeting his gaze steadily. I made my choice. It was the wrong one. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. And the documents on white? Daniel pressed on. Why give them to me? Because by then, she said, I had finally seen my father and Benjamin for what they were. Manipulators who used everyone, even me, to suit their plans. That evidence was my mother's final act of defiance. She knew Daniel. She knew everything they did to your family and others. She couldn't stop it, but she made sure the truth wouldn't die with her. Daniel absorbed her words carefully. You could have used that evidence to negotiate, he said. Gotten yourself a reduced sentence. I could have, she replied quietly, but I didn't. I chose to give it to you. You're free to do whatever you want with it. The silence between them thickened, heavy with everything left unsaid. What will happen to me tomorrow? She finally asked. The federal agents will be contacted, Daniel answered. They'll come for you. Considering your cooperation, you'll probably get a lighter sentence. She took the news without protest, merely nodding in quiet acceptance. And what about us? She asked in a trembling voice. Is there any chance for forgiveness? Daniel stood and moved to the window. Beyond the glass, the mountain loomed large and still, ancient and indifferent to human betrayal and grief. I wasn't made for forgiveness, he said at last. Not for a betrayal like yours. Not for conspiring with Philip behind my back. Not for orchestrating my humiliation on my birthday. He turned to face her. Every choice has consequences, Bella. And now you must face yours. She met his look without wavering. And what about you, Daniel? She asked softly. Where have your choices brought you? Now that you've avenged your family, what's left for you? The question struck deeper than he wanted to admit. For over 20 years, his life had been defined by a single goal: to uncover the truth and bring down the forces that had destroyed his parents. With that almost complete, what was left to drive him forward? Something better, he said, recalling a vow he once made to Tobias. Something greater than revenge. I hope you find it, she murmured. Driving away from the estate, Daniel couldn't help but reflect on the long, winding journey that had brought him to this moment. The orphan who sought order in the military, the operative who trained himself to bury emotion, the financier who built a new identity from the ruins of his past, the husband who had been betrayed, the man who had dismantled an empire. Every chapter of his life had been a stepping stone toward completing his mission. But now, with that mission finally achieved, he found himself asking, who was he now? The next day, Benjamin White's full confession was splashed across every major news outlet. The financial world reeled as the truth came out about a man once celebrated as a titan. 16 families, devastated by his ruthless actions, not only received financial restitution, but also had their reputations restored. Justice, long delayed, had finally been served. Daniel watched the coverage from his office, his closest team members gathered around him. "It's done," Vincent said in a low voice. "At least this chapter is," Daniel replied thoughtfully. "White is finished. So are the Stanton. But others like them still remain." "Thinking about a new cause?" Tobias asked. "A better cause," Daniel corrected. "My parents built their company to help people, to secure the futures they worked so hard for. And in the end," he added, "no one was there to protect them." He looked around at his team. "But we can be there for others." In the months that followed, Axiom Global underwent a transformation. It was no longer just an investment firm. It became a specialized force committed to exposing and dismantling predatory financial operations. With their unique combination of intelligence training and financial expertise, Daniel's team became an unstoppable ally for those targeted by corporate predators. Gordon Stanton received a 20-year prison sentence for his financial misdeeds, a punishment that, given his age, amounted to a life term. Meanwhile, Philip Walker managed to negotiate a lighter sentence of 12 years in exchange for turning state's evidence. Bella, whose cooperation against White had been substantial, faced only 5 years behind bars, with the possibility of parole after 3. Under the terms of his plea deal, Benjamin White surrendered both his vast business holdings and his entire fortune. Barely 6 months after making his very public confession, White was found dead in his modest, unremarkable home, an apparent suicide. Nevertheless, rumors lingered, hinting that disgruntled Russian interests might have had a hand in his demise. On the anniversary of his parents' passing, Daniel made his way back to their graves, a pilgrimage he had delayed for far too long. The quiet, windswept cemetery in the heart of the Midwest seemed a world apart from the ruthless financial battlegrounds where he had fought for so many years. As he placed fresh flowers against the stone bearing both their names, Daniel felt not the icy satisfaction of vengeance, but a gentler, deeper sense of justice, finally realized. "It's finished," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Those who betrayed you have been held accountable. Your honor is restored," he reflected, lingering at the grave as the weight of 20 relentless years began, at last, to lift from his shoulders. "I'm building something new now, something worthy of you." As Daniel made his way back toward the airport, his phone rang. It was Vincent on the line. "The Roberts family in Seattle," Vincent began without any preamble. "They run a small investment outfit. Meridian Global is circling them. Classic corporate predation. They contacted us through the foundation," he continued. "Investigate it thoroughly," Daniel ordered. "If their story checks out, we're going all in." "Already moving on it," Vincent replied. "Same tactics we've seen before." "Then we know exactly how to fight this," Daniel said, feeling a new kind of resolve settle within him, no longer fueled by the cold burn of revenge, but by a steady commitment to the values his parents had lived and died for. The years consumed by anger had finally given way to something else, not forgiveness, for some betrayals were too deep to forgive, but a future shaped by remembrance, no longer imprisoned by past wounds. As the jet climbed into the sharp, clear air of autumn, Daniel Novak, formerly Daniel Kerr, turned his gaze from the place where his old life had ended, toward the horizon, where the true legacy of his parents was finally beginning to rise. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.